The right analogy for, in my mind, is the classic physics problem of the three-body problem that we talked about.
The
right?
three-body problem. All right, take me through this one.
Microsoft's purpose is in service of your purpose.
And again, 2024 is the year that partners come out as the leading edge of the spear on finding this buyer intent.
You show up to every meeting and demonstrate why you are relevant.
Every day I have to force myself to make sure that I'm taking one step ahead in terms of my own learning.
That flywheel of success is where you will build momentum, and that momentum will continue, and then you feed into the other systems to say, this is what we did, this is how we did it together.
Welcome back to the Ultimate Guide to Partnering. I'm Vince Menzione, your host, and I'm on a mission to empower every individual, organization, and partner to achieve their greatest results through successful partnering. Much of the discussion that we've been having these last several months have been on the tectonic shifts that we've been seeing in our world and in our lives, and the increased dominance of the three hyperscalers, Google, Microsoft, and AWS. And now we turn our attention to the technology that's fueling this marketplace transformation. I'm excited to be joined in the studio today with an innovative leader helping to drive this transformation. My friend Trunal is the CEO of Clazar and joins us for a deep dive on the state of the cloud ecosystem and marketplace moment. Trunal, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Vince. Excited to be here.
I am so excited to have you here in the studio in Boca Raton. Flew in late last night. You look pretty chipper though.
Yeah,
I
I got only like maybe 4 hours of sleep, but it's I'm excited. I'm excited for this recording.
As an entrepreneur, when do you get more than 4 hours sleep?
Exactly.
Come on.
Yeah. Entrepreneur and a father of two young girls.
Oh,
as well.
yes,
So,
yes. I went through that stage. It was a long time ago, but I am so excited for our conversation today. As I mentioned in the opening, like you are helping to drive this new marketplace moment, right? Your organization. And you and I actually got to meet when you were at ISV, Confluent. And so you were in the thick of things working with the hyperscalers. And then you made a transition. But for our listeners and viewers that are watching us today that don't know Trunal and don't know your organization, I thought you'd take us on a little bit of a journey. Mm-hmm. Your organization, your mission, and your role within the organization.
Vince, I've been a product and engineering leader for about a decade now. As you mentioned, I live in California on the West Coast, and I started my career in around at 2008, 2007 timeframe. I started with Yahoo, if you remember.
That's fantastic. I was looking at your LinkedIn profile. Like you've been at all the hot spots at different periods of time. I love that.
Yeah, no, I've been lucky to be entrusted by all these organizations to allow me to be a part of their success story. Starting with Yahoo, then I went to LinkedIn, then Airbnb happened, and then the last one was Confluent, which is where I really had this light bulb moment where, maybe if I start a company in this space, it would be successful in certain ways, right?
Yeah.
So like that's the entire story of me. Like let me not go too far back, but like let's say at Airbnb, I started as an engineer, and then I eventually left as the head of host organization, which is a team of engineers and product managers and everyone where we had a mission to help the host on Airbnb side understand and then become successful on the entire Airbnb host journey. And I learned through that journey of 4 and 5 years, I learned so much, and I really got in love with building products, building really fantastic engineering systems.
Yeah.
And that's the experience that I got to Confluent. And then Confluent, as you know, I was the head of engineering for cloud marketplaces, billing and growth. And that's where the inception of the idea of, hey, what would a technology powered super automated platform look like in this ecosystem, which can, which customers might love. And that's what the story of Clazar is. And that's how Clazar was born.
Yeah. So what I hear loud and clear, right? So engineering excellence, two organizations that really set benchmarks in terms of the work that they did. And now you launch into Clazar And let's talk a little bit more about like what is your goal with Clazar? Like, where do you see this organization 5 years from now?
Yeah, when we started Clazar, Vince, Ayush and I, Ayush is the co-founder and CTO based out of Austin. Him and I worked closely together at Airbnb, and this was like 8 years ago at this point in time. But we kept in touch all along, and we wanted to always start a startup of our own. But we were waiting for the right time in our personal lives and also in a professional context, which we were waiting for the moment that felt like right moment for us to take the leap. And when I was at Confluent, I really got to see, got the front row seat onto how the marketplaces are evolving the business and disrupting the whole buying and selling cycle of the enterprises. So when I looked at that, I'm like, okay, or maybe there's something in here that we can start looking into. And that's where the story of marketplaces for me started. So Clazar was started with a singular mission of helping and modernizing the modern sales for the software sales, right?
Yes.
We started with marketplaces because we are seeing this tectonic shift where now majority of the organizations are considering this as a primary channel of procurement and sales. So we thought that would be a good opportunity for us to come in and start a business there. But eventually we want to be the singular platform that where every single software seller in the world comes to buy and sell software.
Wow. That is a big, bold mission. I love that. And as you know, I talk about tectonic shifts. I've been talking about this moment that's been happening with marketplaces. These 3 hyperscalers, we were just talking right before we got started here. I mean, it's astounding right now. There is $1/3 trillion in cloud commitments amongst the big 3, and that's growing rapidly. Microsoft saw an 80% increase in commitments over $100 million or more just this last quarter, in fact. And then we talk about, I talk about this ecosystem piece, and we're gonna dive in a little bit here. But yeah, this has really been quite a moment. I would say that AWS had the early start in IaaS, but the other 2 have fast followed in many respects. We've seen quite a bit of acceleration this year, right? And Google, as you mentioned, is also coming on strong. Let's talk about the evolution of marketplaces. Like, we're in a different place than we were 5 years ago. Probably when you were at Confluent, you were probably in the very early stages of that. What changes and advancements have you seen?
So the changes and advancements, Vince, I've seen in multiple aspects. So let's first talk about the technology. So when the marketplaces started, it was, very rudimentary. It was very early days for them. And each of the hyperscalers have been in different pace of their own, as you know.
Yes.
But what that did is that also reflected in the availability of APIs, the technology, the infrastructure that engineers like myself or my teams needed at the time. That has drastically shifted. It has accelerated to a whole new level now. There's fantastic APIs available. There is amazing support available. There's fantastic documentation available from all the hyperscalers, right? So that's change number 1. That's on the technology side. The other change is on the human behavior or the business side of the equation. Initially, when we went out to the market, we had to convince a lot of the buyers and sellers to even educate them what the channel is. And there's still some of that happening out there, and it will continue to happen. But now there's lots and lots of interest and lots of education that has already happened in the industry. And credit goes to the hyperscalers because amount of the investment that has gone into this space is, much more than what it was a few years ago.
Right.
So those are the 2 trends that I see today, and I can only see them growing. If you look at just, as a data point, if you look at the number of articles and number of posts that are happening in this area, on LinkedIn, I'm sure you can project how few there were a few years ago and how many there are now.
Well, I think about it as more of a marketing function at first, right? The marketplace was set up basically as brochureware in many respects. I think AWS certainly accelerated the transformation with because they were cloud commitment first. They made it easier, and they led the pace in terms of now you can buy off of our cloud commitments, right? And they set the tone, and then Microsoft and Google have followed along here. We've talked about how much has changed just in this brief period of time, right? Canalys said, and Jay McBain has been sitting in that seat and talked about how they had predicted $45 billion in commitments or transactions within 2026, I believe they originally said. And then they called it back to 2025. And then they said they've undercalled it. And then another organization that you compete with, we'll just call it that. They said $100 billion by the end of 2026. Some believe that and I use the Jeffrey Moore analogy of crossing the chasm, right? Because I was a big fan of that technology adoption life cycle and the work there. But you've indicated it's right. It's not the right analogy to talk about crossing the chasm, that there's more at play here than just a linear transformation that's going on. I was hoping you could share a little bit of your analogy and how this applies to this whole, I would say, the tectonic shifts and the confluence that we're seeing amongst the hyperscalers and the markets that we serve.
Absolutely, Vince. So like, we've talked about it, like crossing the chasm may not be the right analogy.
Yes.
The right analogy in my mind is the classic physics problem of the three body problem that we talked about,
The
right?
three body problem. All right, take me through this one.
All right. So like, imagine there's like three like bodies and they're constantly interacting with each other.
Yeah.
And that changes the way we as an ecosystem observer are supposed to change our reaction to them. And in this specific example, the three bodies are the following. First is the hyperscalers, AWS, Azure, and GCP. And they are constantly changing, evolving APIs, evolving strategies, different level of funding that goes through.
Yeah.
Like it is on the rise now, with everyone inputting a lot of funding to the ecosystem, but it can change along the way.
Well, and then the build out, right? So all the investments that are going on, Microsoft's going to do $14 billion a quarter, and then you layer in AI, right? So this is a big function that's now changing their
Huge.
roles, in fact, in terms of what they're providing back to the markets.
Absolutely. And then like now there's new kinds of marketplaces come in, like, Daewoo on my podcast, he mentioned about the data exchange or the data provider marketplaces. I believe AWS already has one and stuff like that. So that's the one part of the three body problem, part one. Part two is the ISVs, the sellers.
Yes.
And if you think about, and you've been in the space a long time, Vince,
I
yourself, right? So when you looked at the journey of the ISVs, that has to change, because the way you were selling, even like 1.5, 2 years ago when the economy was booming, and now where, the budgets are getting cut, there's lots more scrutiny on every single purchase that's been made. There are like literally SaaS companies out there who help you evaluate if your SaaS spend is going through the roof or
It's
not.
optimized.
So, exactly. So like we are at that phase right now. So like, ISVs and leaders such as like myself or, other SaaS companies out there, we have to be really on our toes to make sure that we are reacting in the right fashion to this change on the ISV side.
And I'll tie in AI again too, because now it's all about like, how are you infusing AI into your solutions? So each of these ISV solutions, maybe not every single one of them, but a lot of them are looking at like, well, what's our role in this AI journey that the world is going on right now?
Absolutely. And AI plays like a role in two specific ways. One is disrupting the vertical, like, how do you actually bring AI into your product to provide a better service to your end customer. So that's part one. But the other part is like every single, like, the ease with which now you can build products because of AI is also changing the SaaS ecosystem, right?
Interesting.
Now you have lots of options available. You needed 5, 6, 10 humans to do certain jobs that are no longer needed, that can be very efficiently done via AI, which means the value to market and the ability for you to try out and bring products to the market has also been reduced. The time has been reduced now, right? So I truly believe that ISVs will have more and more opportunities to bring really differentiated and volume products to the market in the coming years to see because of AI. And in the three-body problem, going back to the three-body problem, the last is, I know this is your favorite, is the channel partners, right?
Yes.
And
the
for
ecosystem,
exactly. So for the channel partners, again, like the traditional way of doing business is kind of getting disrupted now, where you have to have this a skill of routing the deal via the marketplace and understanding how that whole ecosystem works, and really be on top of this new mechanism that's coming into the picture, right? So like when you combine these three, that is the three-body problem that we constantly talk about internally at Clazar, and that's the kind of ecosystem that you want to be a part of, because it's challenging and it's fun.
I want to break this apart because this is fascinating, and you've got me a new model here. It might find its way into my talk track and some of my presentations, if you don't mind. But let's talk about the hyperscalers for a second here, right? And we talked about the dominance already, right? And it's becoming more and more profound. Chat GPT just announced 4.0, right? And that tells me that Microsoft is going to have some additional advancements and capabilities that it didn't have just a week ago, 2 weeks ago. It seems like Google's really playing fast catch up here. Where's AWS in the AI journey?
In terms of what we see is, we do see, in terms of the customers that we see customers across the board on all of the on all of the hyperscalers. There is slight differences between each one of them does AI, and slight differences in between how much of support each one of them provide.
Yep.
It's very clear that all three of them are trying to capture the attention of these companies who are bringing AI to the market, right?
Yes.
I know AWS gives a certain number of credits, or GCP gives, or I'm sure there's credits on the Azure side as well. But specifically, what we see is typically customers start with one cloud, and then that cloud marketplaces, and then replicate that across the other hyperscalers as well.
The difference is that the AI is not the same. Like, you could do I won't call it a lift and shift. It's much more elegant than that. But you could take your application as an ISV from one cloud to the next. There's migration tools.
Yeah.
AI is a whole nother game, right? Because once you're infused or locked in, it seems like it's hard to uncouple.
Yeah, I mean, and there's, again, like in a classic infrastructure or an engineering parlance, like, you could have like a pure SaaS way, which, all of these hyperscalers have some solution, again, and a various degree of maturity.
Yes.
And all of them also have a way for you to ship the binary, like the code, directly to them, and then have a deeper research and analysis. And each one of them have different like pros and cons, and just depends on what you want as a business.
You talked about the ISV. You talked about what I refer to as the economic headwinds, right? We saw this big, COVID accelerated a lot of things.
Yeah.
It accelerated. Satya Nadella said 7 years of transformation in 7 months. And truly it moved us, it changed our lives in many respects, and which meant that a lot of technology got deployed very quickly. So we had this big infusion of spend, and then kind of a pullback, right? That's where this economic headwinds comes in. Close to a 500,000 people in the tech space were laid off last year. A lot of the do more with less that we're seeing. And these organizations now, again, a lot of startups, a lot of investments in startups. Right?
Yep.
And congratulations, you secured some additional funding recently.
Thank you.
But we're also seeing the fact that a lot of these ISVs are going and saying, okay, well, now how do I find the customer? And this is where the co-selling really becomes even more important. That gets us to the customer directly by working with the hyperscalers, but that's not necessarily how the customer buys, right? And this ties into this channel conversation, the third element.
Yep.
So the ISVs are saying, okay, now I want to hitch my wagon to the hyperscaler and sell with them. But wait a second, the customer's down here and they're buying from a reseller or a systems integrator or a transactional partner like a CDW, an SHI, or an Insight. How do I get there? And this is the third component that you mentioned, the third piece of the model, which is the channel, the ecosystem. And I feel like that piece isn't fully articulated yet the way the other two. And this is why I'm really fascinated on where Clazar is going to take us, because you have now said here at the table that it's not just about cloud go-to-market. It's really about the whole buying journey.
Absolutely.
So take me there a little bit further.
Yeah, and Vince, if you look at the innovation that has happened in the space, right? Like there's lots of innovation in like AI. Like we've spoken about just in the last 10 minutes, like so much about AI itself, right? But that innovation is now slowly making to the traditional businesses and channel partners. I would say have been around for the longest time. It's a very mature
40 plus years.
Exactly, and it's a very mature system and a very mature ecosystem and stuff like that, right? So now what I do see is I see a lot of increased understanding of the space because of the cloud marketplaces and how they are disrupting and helping some of these ecosystem players, right? So what's going to happen is, just like Clazar, I'm anticipating more and more innovation happening in this space. because now it's caught the eye of the engineers and the product people who are like, okay, wait, if I'm building a product, if I'm building a service, if I have to take it to the customer, I can no longer just like ignore this thing that I, first of all, didn't even know existed. And now that I know it existed, there's so much opportunity
Yes.
for me to go in and automate and bring real value to end customers. So I think that's what I'm anticipating seeing.
What's interesting to me is I'm using coupling and decoupling quite a bit here, but we're decoupling from the old methodology, which is, the channel was created 40 plus years ago, actually down here in Boca Raton. I always refer to Bill Gates coming down to Boca Raton, signing an agreement with IBM to license software, and then resellers and OEMs developed hardware and software. And then there was a need to get those to market, right? It started off with like you'd get a magazine sent to your business saying, here, buy PCs from us, buy software from us, buy networking hardware from us. And so that was a way that organizations purchased. Organizations of all sizes, SMB up to enterprises would buy that way in many respects. And then those organizations got built out. They have thousands and thousands of sellers now embracing this customer. And now I'm up here on my journey as an ISV working with a hyperscaler, and it feels decoupled from that journey. And each of the hyperscalers are various. I'm pointing to the hyperscalers here. They're at various stages of getting that glue between the two motions, their cloud go-to-market and their ecosystem. But it seems like a lot needs to happen here in terms of the development, because you have existing models, you have compensation models, you have procurement, everything that comes through, I'll call it the supply chain that takes everything through to the customer. How do we streamline that? Like, how do we think through it? It seems that AWS has done a better job here than the other two, maybe because they had a couple of year head start. They had 5 organizations go to $1 billion in transactions last year.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Jay sat in that seat and said, they became the 5th largest distributor last year.
Yep.
And they basically shot across the distribution channel directly to the ISV, directly to the customer, or to the channel to the customer. How are we going to streamline it? Like, where do you see your role in that process?
Yeah, so I'll answer that in 2 ways, right? One is I'll tell you a story before we actually get to the actual answer.
I love it.
Like when I was at Airbnb, the motivation for engineers and product people was eventually a metric on the customer side. So I strongly believe that any company has such a culture is going to be successful because everything is tied to eventual customer goal, right? Now, if you take that example and bring it to the enterprises, which is kind of the shift that I did in my career, like I've been at LinkedIn, Airbnb, Yahoo, all of these consumer companies. Then I went to Confluent and I really saw what the enterprise world looked like, and I was fascinated. I'm like, I'm never leaving this world ever again.
It's very different than the consumer world.
Very different, very different. And there are some parallels like this one, right? So now if you bring that value to companies like, let's say, Clazar, where we value the customer value a lot, now what's going to happen is engineers are going to figure out, okay, like if I have to figure out a way to sell my whatever software that I'm building, I can no longer ignore the entire channel partners ecosystem,
Right.
because that plays such a huge part. And especially as your organization starts maturing, it plays even bigger part, right? And has all of those benefits like, cost benefits, distribution benefits, all of that. So when engineers come to that, like that is going to like disrupt some of these equations. And then, these hyperscalers have done a really good job. I would definitely say AWS has this EPPO process, which is really well loved by our customers. And, we always get good feedback. And GCP is coming up with something like, Azure has their MPO process. Now, this is where the technology and automation can actually help accelerate the motion of the business, right? And now this is specific to the hyperscalers. Now, imagine a world in which the hyperscalers are there, but there's also the other business that happens outside of hyperscalers. And how does that automation work?
That's right.
So I do definitely see some of these learnings that have happened over the past decade with the hyperscalers will be brought to the direct channel, and things will be better for the future.
Yeah, and you mentioned things like multi-party offers, which is Microsoft's term, and then there's the channel partner private offers.
Private offer,
yeah. These acronyms roll off the tongue, but essentially what they're doing is they're coupling the channel with the buying behavior of the ISV with the hyperscaler.
Absolutely.
And pulling it together.
Yep.
And ultimately, I see it as the customer is going to be pulling. You talked about the customer experience. The customer is going to be pulling a solution together, right? What's fascinating to me, we talked about the cloud commitments. These decisions are no longer being made in the lines of business, these technology purchases. These cloud commitments are being made at the board level. Vodafone just made a big agreement with Microsoft for $1.5 billion. Boeing over $1 billion. I mean, you rattle off all the Fortune 500 right now. You know these decisions are being made at the board level. And so then the actual solution purchases, which is really like, how do we solve for a problem? We have a security requirement. We maybe need to couple together 3 ISVs to solve for backup and recovery. And then we need a systems integrator, and we need another organization to do managed services around that, right? So I need to pull like all 5 of those together, and I want to buy off of my $1 billion cloud commitment. This is where the multi-party or the CPPO comes in, right?
100%.
And so how do you help to streamline that process for them?
Yeah. So in terms of the technology enabled these, like there's some certain tools out there, and there's certain solutions, but by and large it's still a lot of manual work, Vince, as you probably know.
Yes. It's still a paper shuffling going on here. A little bit too much right now.
But I mean, I would say hyperscalers have done a really good job, like especially with the multi-party offers or the CPPOs. There's fantastic APIs available. Yes. So we build an experience on top of it that combines some of those elements, and that's the early signs of streamlining some of this flow, the procurement flows. Yeah. I would say. I wouldn't say that we are in a space where this is like solved problem. So like the things will evolve as we go, and time will tell how it works out.
Now I take your model apart now. Now I've got it. So you've got a 3-body model. But within each one of those 3-body models, there might be another technology curve going on in each one of them independently of one another. And
absolutely.
Then they overlap. Maybe this is a 3D model.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Vince. It is a 3D model, because if you like the 3 models, again, like it's the hyperscalers, it's the ISVs, and the channel, and each one of them is a behemoth of a system.
Yes.
And they have their own like micro ecosystems going on within them that's going to change the way the entire ecosystem operates. So it's just a fascinating.
And they're
model.
each at different levels of maturity along their journey.
Yeah.
The ISVs are at different levels of maturity on their journey, and the channels different levels of maturity on their journey. And I know from working with the channel partners, some are, and I've had Insight on the podcast just recently. In fact, Tony Savoyan and Dee Berger, the president of Insight North America, they're much further along the journey than some of these other resellers are, right? They get ISV, they get solution selling, and they're bringing that down to with their tens of thousands of customers, and they're stitching it all together the way we discussed.
Absolutely.
But others aren't there yet.
Yeah. And then how can technology help with the acceleration? Like whenever I think about technology's job is to accelerate something, right? Like whatever is happening organically in the world, technology should come in and accelerate that value for the people and the humans out there, right? Like Tesla is doing something similar where accelerate the transition to sustainable energy. But like technology plays this really critical roles, and I'm seeing similar kind of role will be played by technology in the channels partner space as well.
It's a fascinating time we live with.
Absolutely.
So you think it's going to be a 5-year journey down the line? You think it's going to take that long, or do you see an acceleration? It seems like AI is accelerating so fast right now. Will marketplaces accelerate at a slower pace than AI, I guess is the question I have.
Yeah, I think 5 years to really mature, I would say. But I think you would start seeing some really cool technology emerge in the next, say, 1 to 2 years time frame, and then it'll take its own course to mature. Like there's just so much AI out there, but I do believe that eventually in the longer run it'll settle, and you'll have fewer AI tools that really get the job done, and everything else would be kind of non-existent. Similarly, in this space, like you would see some innovation happening, and that's the thing with innovation, right, Vince? Like you have to try something, but guaranteed some of those things are not gonna work. But the things that do work, they stick for the longer time, and that takes time, that takes effort and time to really mature.
We are thrilled to announce our partnership with InPartner Software, the world's leading provider of partner management technologies. Serving over 4 million partners globally, InPartner excels in delivering cutting-edge solutions for partner relationship management and partner marketing automation. Their robust platform offers essential tools like program compliance tracking, customizable partner journeys, and comprehensive business planning. These features empower partner teams to swiftly transition from program design to achieving maximum value. InPartner is dedicated to supporting partner ecosystems everywhere and continues to innovate with new modules like Analytics Studio, designed to help track and maximize the ROI of your partner program. For more information, visit InPartner.com. What about the laggards? Like we talked about this 3D model now. There's laggards in each, maybe not so much at the hyperscale level, but within the ISV community, there's still some laggards.
Yeah.
I saw organizations that were selling the old model, right? They were still selling the on-prem software or the old subscription model, which wasn't a truly cloud model.
Yeah.
And then there's the born in the clouds as well. And then on the channel side, certainly we mentioned the early adopters or the ones that have accelerated, and there's laggards there as well. What are you seeing from those laggard organizations in terms of being slow to adopt marketplaces?
Yeah, so I'll talk about the ISVs first. On the ISV side, like, a few years ago, like not many people even knew about it. And then like the examples that I've seen, people are trying to, people are almost like skeptical, Vince. They're like, hey, who's going to go buy enterprise software by going to a market?
It's a waste of time.
It's a waste of time. Like, but all right, let's put a couple engineers and see what happens, right? And some people gave it that chance. And those early adopters who really leaned in and tried to really go deep and figure out how this thing works actually were rewarded with handsome rewards in terms of ARR, in terms of, increased deal size and all of that. Still, like if you look at the day and age that we live right now, there's still a lot of apprehension. I do see less than previously for sure, but still there is. What that means is the startups that are coming to the scene, the companies that are now maturing and going into the Series B, Series C, Series D level, they now all of a sudden need to really have a really good understanding and grasp of this channel, which they do not. And the reason being, like as you start growing, the pressure to grow revenue and find new channels to increase your sales is growing as well. And you can no longer ignore this channel because of the 360 billion committed spend that we just talked about.
That's right.
Which is locked into the hyperscaler. So you don't really have an option. Like it's like it's
inevitable. You can't ignore that.
You can't ignore that. And Vince, you know this, but the projection for this committed spend to go to $1 trillion in the next few years.
It's going to happen sooner than later.
Exactly. So it's no longer a channel that you can have an afterthought about. And just like I give this example to each one of our customers and prospects and everyone, like every single channel, like marketing is a channel, sales outbound is a channel, partnerships is a channel, like marketplaces, and you need to invest time to get the rewards out of it. It's really, I mean, if you just put up a website and expected customers to flow in, it's not going to happen. You need to do SEO, you need to do paid marketing, you need to do all of that.
You might need to do a podcast.
Exactly. So it's a similar kind of motion, and the laggards that are now lagging will actually pay heavily if they don't accelerate their understanding of the whole
This
space.
reminds me of a conversation 12 years ago, getting up on stage at a channel event and speaking about the cloud to all of these organizations that were looking at me like doe-eyed, like, why should I change my business model, right? The ISVs were selling on-prem software back in those days. Resellers were selling Dell computers and Targus bags, and we were sitting back there at Microsoft going, we want you all to come to the cloud with us. And I feel like we're on the same journey with Marketplace. I feel like it's accelerated a little bit faster than I expected, but I think that's the way the laggard thinks about it. Like,
Absolutely.
Why is it relevant to me? Why should I change my business model?
Yeah.
What does the future of go-to-market look like? And how do software sellers sell in the future? Like, how does this change? Like, I'm a seller working for an ISV, or I'm working for Microsoft, or I'm working in the channel. What does my future sales process look like? And how do you help support that?
Absolutely. So, like, I strongly believe that, now what we are seeing, and Jay McBain talks about it a lot, where the buyer behavior has changed.
Yes.
The traditional buyer who was like, pen and paper and, pick up phone calls and talk, that still has a lot of value. But the buyer of this era actually comes in with a lot of research wins. They know exactly what they're looking for.
right.
They know exactly what their value proposition is, and they know exactly how to extract the value. When we talk to our customers, some of our customers are extremely tech savvy. Like they do a proper POC with us. They understand each and every feature that we have. We have a team that helps them understand the differentiated value of the product and platform. But that is a change that is happening in the world right now, where, and then in the future, this is just going to happen more and more. Like, I can't imagine my daughters going in and like picking up they might not even drive their cars. Like the cars are going to drive themselves, right?
Exactly.
So they may not know how to I drove a stick shift when I grew up.
Me too.
And that's going to be a thing of a past. So similarly, like what does that do to software procurement and software business overall? It's going to be a whole lot of different world looking like in not near future. Yeah.
Well, it ties into the whole ecosystem conversation in such a strong way. Like Jay again, Jay, you're getting a lot of kudos here. You're not even in the room today. But we talked about the 8 seats at the table or the 6 seats at the table, right? Because you're making that decision process by talking to all of your trusteds. They might be other technology organizations you're working with. The millennial buying behavior, which is changing, which says 75% want to get to end of job without actually talking to another human, right?
Yep.
So selling changes in a big way,
Yep.
right? The cookie, that whole process that was so prevalent just 5 or 6 years ago, that you had modern marketing, you had SDRs, you had the seller coming in and doing the close, right? That's changed. That's gone.
Yeah.
And you're saying is I'm doing all the research and I'm coming to you and saying, okay, now I'm ready to procure.
Yeah.
I want to buy it off of this marketplace.
Exactly.
Right.
And also lots of customers, when we as engineers, when we looked at software to procure, there's like different methodology that we use. We actually almost always went to the website of the vendor. We looked at the quality of the APIs, the quality of the documentation. Is the pricing public or not? Like, do I get what I pay for?
Right.
And in gone are the days of, my pricing is opaque. Like, I'll tell you, let's get in a conversation. Like, that just doesn't build trust.
That's right.
And then anything that you could do to build trust with the buyer is going to be paramount. So like pricing is one. And on the same trust topic, like if you can attach your software to the hyperscalers, that automatically increases your scale of trust 100x, because these are household names. Everyone knows about it. People almost assume that you're a legit partner, and that you've gone through and you do have to go through a stringent security questionnaire and check before you do get listed on the marketplaces. So all of these factors play into the trust factor.
Yes.
It's going to change the way we buy software.
Yeah, and it ties in, and then it comes down to the fundamentals of partnering, which I always talk about.
Yeah.
The 7 principles, and trust, mutual trust being so prevalent and important in the process. And then building your co-sell methodology, like building your trust with the partner that you're working with, which is just so important. But now I want to dive in on Clazar, right? I really feel like, we've touched on the trends we're seeing, and it's a terrific conversation. But as you're not the first one to market here, right? And there have been some other organizations. Some have been on this podcast. We don't mention any names. Some are friends, and as you are. But I also feel like, okay, so why now? Like, why did you decide to do this? What is the problem you're solving that's differentiated? And why is Clazar unique in this market, this amazing market that we both play in?
Yeah, Vince. And then the way we think about the space is we are in the space of helping softwares and buyers and sellers buy and sell more and making it easy, right? We started with marketplaces because of the tectonic shift that we talked about just, at the start of the podcast. So when we looked at, okay, here's our mission, here's we want to get to, here's the ideal outcome that we want to have in terms of what our mission is. Our mission is that, buyers and sellers of software business are able to procure the software in the most easiest fashion. Nice. And sellers are able to reach the buyers that they want without much friction. So that's the vision. Now, if you and this is kind of what we do at Clazar all the time. Okay, here's where we want to get to. what are all the ways that we can get to here, and what's the fastest, most efficient way of achieving that outcome. And we do that on the project basis, on engineering basis, on product basis, but also on the vision basis, which is, hey, here's where we want to take the company in the next 1-2 years, next 5 years, 10 years, whatever that might be. What's the fastest way for us to get there? And what we concluded was, okay, the no matter what we do, if we do not catch on this trend of cloud marketplaces and co-sell, it's like we are going to be swimming against the tide.
Yes.
So that's why we started a company in this space. But eventually what we want to get to is we want to get to a platform that is the singular platform that anyone needs to buy and sell software. And that's a differentiated value that you will start seeing as the company grows. Like, we are a Series A company right now. We're growing really fast, but we are investing a lot in product and our GTM motion to bring that value, differentiated value very, very soon to our customers.
Nice. You're taking a lot of the complexity out of the process. Right?
Absolutely.
It's still not as easy today as it looks from my side of things. Right?
No, it's not. And Vince, like, if you look at the company, each company has a DNA. Like, I firmly believe that, like, I worked at LinkedIn, had a different DNA. I worked at Airbnb, different DNA, Confluent, different DNA, right? So if you look at each of the company's DNA, they have a unique value prop and a unique reason why they are a certain way. It's just like exactly like human beings, right?
Right.
Clazar's DNA is, if you look at the quality of engineering, the quality of product, like, my background, Ayush's background, all of these folks that we've put together, we have a fantastic group of individuals. So that is what's going to differentiate us. And that is the value prop that we bring to the table.
Yeah.
And that brings into the quality of the platform, the quality of integrations, the quality of customer service that we provide. And that is going to be eventually differentiator. I do believe, like, Vince, like companies, there's thousands and thousands of companies out there, right? It's like differentiators can be on different angles, but at the end of the day, the quality of customer trust that you are able to earn is the only differentiator that matters.
Right.
Because, and that can take in different shapes. Like, some people like your APIs, some people like your SDKs, some people like your, the quality of documentation, as we talked about, like stuff like that.
Yep.
But eventually all that boils down to how much trust are you able to get with your customers, and how can you serve them for the longer time.
And coming at it from an engineering pedigree, I would say, an engineering DNA, and then solving for complex problems.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe not stitching or trying to cobble together to get there.
Yeah, exactly. And
Right.
this is one of the other things that I would like to mention is, like, our mantra or our DNA is always to have very high quality engineering and a product that you love. Like, this was a long time ago when me and Ayush were trying to figure out, okay, what kind of company do you want to build? And then we actually made a list of products that we said, okay, what are the products that we absolutely love that we use on a day-to-day basis? Like, I love using Airbnb whenever I go out.
Yeah.
I always
It's a
use
fabulous-
Airbnb.
I mean,
Fantastic service.
Yep.
I am biased because I work there, but still, I think it's a very...
and LinkedIn.
And
is
LinkedIn,
developed
exactly.
in a very true to business fashion.
Yeah. But on the consumer side, like, products like 1Password, which, it's just there. I'm not sure if you used it, but it's one of the favorite products that we've had. Slack is a fantastic product.
It
We
is.
use it on a daily basis.
I still use Teams because of Microsoft, but yes, I do use Slack occasionally.
Yeah, and then, but these products are evoking an emotion of love and of you really liking and absolutely loving that product, that existence in the world.
Exactly.
And that is what we want to do to enterprise software.
Yeah. And you reminded me, and I don't want to digress from the conversation, but you reminded me that the 3 hyperscalers all came about it from a different pedigree.
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft came from the on-premise software world.
Absolutely.
AWS came at it from being a retailer and having you swipe a credit card to get access to their data centers, and then Google from search.
Mm-hmm.
And they've each come. It's funny because they're now in a common arena that they're playing in right now.
Exactly. And this ties back to the DNA conversation. Like, if you look at these 3 behemoth and super successful companies, but still they each have a different DNA. And that, when you look at their the way they're approaching the problem of ecosystem, as you talk about, is slightly different for that reason.
Different. Yeah. And you can see it, right? Because Microsoft is solving for the enterprise in many respects. They think enterprise first, even though they play down market. Google is coming at it from data and AI because that's where search led them. And AWS is coming at it from the customer, because the customer obsession piece, the Jeff Bezos principles, and then also the marketplace. Their learnings in marketplace are astounding, right? I mean, they've got the most successful marketplace in the hemisphere, in the world. So yeah, you can see that. You can see how their lineage has gotten them there.
Absolutely.
And it's also where their benefits are. Like on the other side, when you're sitting there as one of the ISVs trying to figure out where do I partner.
Yeah, exactly.
That's essentially where you go.
And then what I'm excited to see is as the time goes along, like because this is such a wide and huge space that we are playing with, how do these three huge organizations help shape the future of where this is going?
Yep.
Is going to be fascinating to watch.
From an engineering perspective and from Clazar's perspective, how do you have to watch their, like we talked about the three models, but how do you have to think about the hyperscaler model changing? Like how do you have to adjust or pivot your business? Pivot is always a big important factor for me in terms of business transformation.
Yeah. So the way I look at it is, this like, whenever we start any business, the first rule of thumb is try to go to a market that is massive. And we know that, if the three hyperscalers are in this market, this is going to be a huge market. Also, these three hyperscalers are all growing all the time, and I wouldn't say they're converging. They're evolving in their own ways.
Yes.
What that does is that gives an opportunity for a company like Clazar to come in and simplify the cross hyperscaler. It's just basically like the multi-cloud strategy that we talk about in the cloud infrastructure world. But this is for the GTM side of the house, where you have to make sure, all right, my customers are across all of the three hyperscalers, and perhaps maybe there's a fourth, marketplace up and coming. And maybe even like we have some customers there, right?
Who do you think the fourth is? Is it Oracle? Is it where do you see?
I think Oracle might be the fourth one. I've heard some developments that they're working on, but nothing official from them as such. But that might be the other one. There might also be the local ones, like the regional ones. They are in the region like APAC market or the Asia market or the MENA market. Like there might be local ones out there who might just replicate the model that we've seen. It could potentially be the hyperscalers replicating the model already, or some of the local ones as well. But that's kind of what I anticipate seeing. Yeah.
Fascinating conversation. We could be here all day right now discussing this in greater depth. But as you know, I'd like to pivot. I'm fascinated with the personal career journey. We talked a little bit about it.
Yeah.
I noticed you spent some time at Arizona State University.
I did.
I did an executive program. I wasn't there for 2 years like you were, but I did an executive program there. So kind of the heat that we have here in South Florida this time of year. I'm sure you became accustomed to it. But I'd love to talk about, I use this analogy of the dinner party. It's my favorite question to ask each of my guests.
Yeah.
And so Trunal, you were hosting a dinner party. And you could host this dinner party anywhere in the world. I'd be fascinated to hear about that as well. And you can invite any three guests from the present or the past to this dinner party. So I even had a guest or two say somebody in the future that they wanted to invite to their dinner party. Whom would you invite to this incredible dinner party and why?
Okay. All right. So let's first talk about where I would love to host it. So I grew up in India and grew up in the town of Mumbai, or Bombay as it used to call it. I love the city. I go there, quite often. My parents are still there. Lots of friends still. So my entire early life family is all there. Now we live in California, so it's a little bit hard, but we still love to visit.
Yes.
So I would host the party in that city. That's one.
Very nice.
Then I would invite the following people. First, I would invite Lewis Hamilton. You know who that is?
I don't. Who is Lewis Hamilton?
So I'm a huge fan of F1 races.
Okay.
And I've watched growing up. I was always watched all of these races, and Michael Schumacher, all of these names I was familiar with. But the recent name that you might want to look him up, he's a fantastic.
I went last year to the one in Miami. So.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
He was probably racing, right?
He was probably racing. Yes, he's still around. So he's like a 7-time world champion of F1 races. But that's not the reason why I wanna have time with him. I watch his videos. I'm a huge fan of him, and I think there is when people become successful, I do believe that they have to have a purpose, and I feel like the way he is going about his things, 7-time world champion hasn't happened before, probably will not happen again, but still that's not what he talks about when you watch his content online. What he talks about is a lot about, okay, what am I doing that I've gotten to this place to affect a change in the world. Because if I don't use my whatever resources that I have now to do that, then it's not useful, right? So that's a fascinating thought to have. So I would love to spend some time with him.
Well, it's fascinating that a Formula One racer would think about that.
Yeah,
that in itself, I wouldn't be thinking that they would think that a forethought.
Exactly. So that's one person, and the other person that I would love to invite is Kobe Bryant. If you were around,
yes. Tragic. My son was a huge Kobe. It's still a huge Kobe.
I know. Yeah, it's such a tragic. But like, I'm just fascinated by the personality, and the reason why I'm fascinated by it is because there's like, I follow this principle of really investing a lot of time in the process and not worry about the outcome. Because the process itself is the journey itself is the destination. It's not the destination itself. And I feel like, Kobe was the epitome of that. Like, he was all about the process. Whether you win or lose, like, it's the same process that you follow, and being able to extract like the joy out of it. And it's really hard, Vince, because we are human beings. We have emotions. Like, when you win, you're high. When you lose, you're low, right? But how do you maintain that like a singular or same emotional quotient all along the way? Is a very hard thing. So I would love to pick his brains if I could on that one.
Fascinating. You still have one more person though.
One more person. All right. Let's do Novak Djokovic, the tennis player.
Very interesting group here.
I love this. No, and then the reasoning for that is, I feel like he wasn't the first one, or he wasn't the most like Federer, who's like, apparently gifted. I think he's done everything in his life because he's worked extremely hard towards it, and he's been focused and disciplined. And like, if you look at his diet, like, it's
he's incredible. He's an incredible athlete. And so that level of discipline, I would love to have that in me if I could. And so would love to pick his brain on. Yeah, and the mindset too. Tennis is such a hard sport, both mentally and physically.
Yeah,
people discount it. I mean, these are incredible athletes.
For sure.
And we have a tennis pedigree in our family. So
that's fantastic.
I love watching him and all the other amazing tennis players.
I know.
So I can't believe this. We are at the midpoint of 2024. Like, what happened? Like, I was just wishing you Happy New Year. It felt like last week. For all of our viewers and listeners out there, we're going through this journey. I was hoping you could help us and help them. What do we need to be thinking about for the second half of the year? Where should I be leaning in if I'm a partner, if I'm a technologist in this space? And where can I optimize for success going into the second? And we don't have a crystal ball in terms of where the economy, we have elections going on. I mean, it's an interesting time right now in our lives and our journey. But what would you say to our listeners and viewers about how they can optimize for success for the rest of this year?
Yeah, and what I would say, Vince, is being aware of what's happening in the industry is like, that's one of the biggest. I mean, for startups, for founders like myself, you could be like a early one, like seed, pre-seed, or on a hyperscale journey like us, or maybe a little bit more mature on Series C, Series D.
Yep.
But along the entire spectrum, the one thing that you have to figure out is, okay, how is the world changing around you? And then go and react to it in a way that you are still in time. Ideally, you don't want to be reactive. You want to be proactive, where you anticipate the change and then align towards that change and be ahead of the curve. Many times it is possible, sometimes it is not. But in the case, at least, like, I don't like, worry about missing a train or missing a boat, like stuff like that. There's always time, as long as you're cognizant of your surroundings. So that's what I would say. What I'm seeing out there in the market is this entire like marketplaces plus co-sell motion is picking up really, really well, and it's only going to accelerate from here. So if you do not have a strategy around it, or at least if you've not like done some research, there's plenty of content out there. We put out good content on our website, on our LinkedIn as well. So viewers can feel free to consume it. But that's what I would say. Like, if you make a conscious choice to not invest, I would say that's a step one of it. But not knowing about it is not an option anymore.
Yeah. Be cognizant, research. I would say lean in a big way. I think organizations that lean in are the most opportunity for success right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we didn't really get into the whole deep, co-sell and what the mechanics of, like, we would be here for two more hours if we did
Well,
that.
I love that. We're going to have you back. So
Yeah.
going to give you a reason to, or I'll have to come out to San Francisco.
Yes,
And
yeah.
we'll do it on, it gets hot here in Florida this time of year. So I'd be happy to come to San Francisco later this summer. So, no, you've been a fascinating guest. You've been an incredible guest. I've been so excited to have you come join us. We've been anticipating doing this for quite some time now. So, Trunal, I want to thank you again for your time, for making the trip out here to Florida, and to being here for our listeners and viewers on The Ultimate Guide to Partnering. Thank you.
Vince, thank you so much for having me. This is a beautiful part of the country. I'm looking forward to spending some time here today, and then I'm looking forward to hosting you in San Francisco.
I love that. Thanks for listening to this episode of Ultimate Guide to Partnering. Hopefully this episode and all the episodes we've recorded are helping you better align your partner strategy to achieve your greatest results. So I want to ask you something. Have you implemented everything you've been learning? And are you now achieving the growth and revenue objectives that you hope to achieve? If not, it's time to take action now. Join Ultimate Partner Experience. We're building the community I've always dreamed about. With UPX, you get access to exclusive industry insights, unparalleled networking opportunities, tons of educational resources, and support from a community that shares your goals. Join us now. Visit our website, theultimatepartner.com, and sign up today.